Hello and welcome to On Point. My name is Matt Vanderveer. And today we'll be talking about religion and its role or lack thereof in American lives. The Los Angeles Times reports that the most rapidly growing religious category today is composed of those Americans who say they have no religious affiliation. So why are some people religious, and why do others decide to reject religion? Here to talk about this and more is the coordinator of the Jewish Studies program here at CSUN, Professor Jody Myers. Next, we have Pastor Robert Goss of the Metropolitan Community Church in North Hollywood. He is also a religious studies professor here at CSUN. And we have Lois Lyons. She is part of a group called the Humanist Association of Los Angeles. Thank you for being here, guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
So my first question has to do with religion and its definition. Webster Dictionary defines religion as worship and service to a supernatural power or powers that control human destiny. So I wonder, Professor Myers, what is your definition of religion?
Yes, I wouldn't use that.
Yeah, neither would I.
Because that's really defining it about belief in God. I talk about, in my classes, we talk about the assumption that there's more to the world than the physical reality. So there's another dimension of existence. You can call that God, you can not call that God. Behavior that's prescribed and recommended, and a sort of social structure that is connected to that particular community to preserve, to reinforce, and to enable people to act upon those beliefs and behaviors together.
I come out of the Harvard program in comparative religion, so I divide faith and then tradition, all those things that we study in a textbook. And faith is an orientation to the divine. So you keep it very wide, and that human beings by nature are oriented to wider reality. And so therefore we always ask questions. And so if questions are a form of moving towards transcendence and mystery. And so that has been an organizational sort of point. Then if you understand that faith is not belief, which you have to make a distinction, because belief falls into the category of tradition, rituals, scriptures, and all those things. You perceive that an insider understands things a little different from a scholar who's outsider. So when we study religion from a book point of view, you really also have to confirm it with conversations of how an insider understands it. So it's really a kind of a dual perspective in terms of trying to understand this phenomena of religion.
Right. And Lois, go ahead and talk a little bit about what a humanist is and how it differs, or not so much differs, but what it is next to an atheist, and then your definition of religion.
Well, humanism is a way of life, a philosophy, if you will, that does not have a God at its center. Most humanists are atheists or agnostics. That's how they identify themselves. And it is simply a way of living life without anything supernatural. And as far as my definition of religion, I wouldn't use that one. I don't use the word religion when it comes to humanism, although some people do call it religion, because religion is usually considered to be God-centered by most people, at least in the United States. So, but I do know that religion itself, the word religion itself means something that binds together. And in that sense, I suppose you could call humanism a religion, but it has nothing to do with God.
I see. And Jody, why is religion so much a part of the philosophy and law and moral systems of so many societies throughout human history?
I think that that's an interesting question that I don't really know about. I just know that it is. And it's the question of whether our brains are programmed that way or whether it's just a matter of habit, whether religion is just one of those elements of society that do bind people together, and we are human beings, we're social animals, and this is one way that helps us connect to people. That's a possibility, but...
I wonder what you think.
I go back to an old Jesuit priest I had at Holy Cross College. He says, human beings are born into a story, and the story we want to push back to understand origins. Where did we come from? But it also has questions of destiny. Where are we going to go? And I think religion struggles with that last question, what happens to us when we die? And then it raises the question, what is life about? And it throws that question really in terms of what is the meaning of life? And so I think that's a very sort of key component in terms of the struggle with death and mortality and asking some very ultimate questions. What is the purpose of my life? Is there anything more?
Mm-hmm. And I wonder what the humanist perspective of what he said would be, the idea that we need answers of what happens after we die and those kind of things.
Well, I can tell you what my feeling is about it, and that is that I think that people do have a need to have their questions answered, and they come at it in different ways. And a lot of people go to religion because that's the way they were brought up, and they follow that path. And some people choose to step away from a religious philosophy and go into something more like humanism or atheism, because they feel as if they can devise a philosophy for themselves without theism, without a God.
I think a lot of folks also who grow up in a tradition go through a natural stage of questioning that tradition. And I think, in class I tell students, question, because you don't want to just take the answers for granted. You want to probe and find the meaning for yourself. And so questioning is really important. Wrestling with that tradition you grew up with, you may leave that tradition and find something more meaningful, or you may reappropriate that in a far more meaningful way, in a deeper way.
But I want to just add that I think a lot of people are religious simply out of habit, like you're saying. And we are now in a society where we don't have to just follow what our parents do. We have those choices, but most societies are much more constrained than ours. And so, I mean, how many of our students really sit and think deeply about what do I really believe? They tend not to, and I think that's true about most people. They don't sit and examine very deeply.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. A recent Pew study just came out that said atheists have more knowledge about religion than devout people in their respective religions. So in essence that, atheists knew more about Christianity or Judaism than Christians or Jews.
That's true.
Right.
I mean,
so why do you think that is?
I encounter at a gay leather bar bullet my atheist friend. Every time I come in, he needs to talk about religion. And finally, one Sunday, I said, you talk more about religion than any of my folks in church does.
Right.
And it startled him, but it was true.
Yeah.
I think that though atheists may discard religion, they're good dialogue partners because they're asking some very seminal questions that people of faith have to wrestle with and be able to answer. I have a lot easier time with atheists because I think they're fun than I do with fundamentalism, which I think really they shut down any sort of conversation. And so atheists are fun to talk to.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it.
Atheist, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see why atheists would know more about religion because we're always on the defensive. We're considered to be demons by some people. And so we have to get our ammunition. And where do you get your ammunition but from the Bible? And so I think maybe we are more willing to talk about it because we'd like to get our point across that it isn't absolutely necessary to have God to live a good life.
Well, one thing I found interesting in the Pew study was that it found that Black Protestants and Latino Catholics knew the least about their religion and were also some of the most devout. So I wonder if you can make any connections to why you think that is. I'll go ahead and ask you.
I think that has to do with culture and ethnicity and growing up maybe not even questioning sufficiently.